Today we're looking at my Canon EOS M50 B-roll settings. Basically any situation where I'm going to put it on a tripod, take it off a tripod, film myself. These settings seem to be the best so far. On the main screen you can't really do anything with the Q menu like the M5, but in here it's just basically all the video settings because I am in the video mode. That seems the best for this situation. You can film in other modes, but this one is the best. I have it in manual video. So I do full manual settings for my video, got the shutter speed, aperture, ISO. Let's look at the settings. You can see you can change manual video here as well in the menu itself or the Q button. So with video recording types, of course I usually use 24 or 30 or 60 sometimes. It really depends on the situation. Sound recording for B-roll footage. I really don't use that audio very much, so you can just put it into audio. You can, of course, if you have a microphone on it, put it into manual and adjust the levels based on the microphone. Got ISO settings. I have my settings set to full manual, so I don't really use the auto ISO. But in that situation, you can adjust that if you want to. Here we've got white balance. Sometimes I set it to automatic, but in indoor situations, I would set it to something based on what do you think the color temperature is. So 5200 is kind of an outdoor situation, where sometimes I just leave it on this one. Picture style, that's up to you. Again, I usually use faithful, it's just simple, pretty easy to use, and I don't have to mess with it too much. Touch and drag settings. In this case, I turn these off because I do not use them in this setup. You can see the viewfinder is not switching, so we'll get to that. With the AF method, I will talk about that a little bit more. Basically, I use the tracking most of the time, but I have the buttons set up here to switch between these, which we'll get to. I also have peaking disabled in this because I don't use it in this situation. It's usually just the camera sitting there doing autofocus, recording what I'm doing. So with this setup, usually on a tripod, I will disable image stabilization because it's gonna, at least the first 1, 2, 3 seconds, you'll get some weird wobbliness sometimes with the lenses that do have IS, so I have that disabled when it's on a tripod especially. I have all these extra ones disabled like auto level and auto slow shutter. I don't use those because they would mess with the video. Here the other main settings, let's go through these as well. I have the wireless disabled, don't really need it in this situation, just uses power, it wastes battery. So in this one, let's go into the shooting info display, screen info settings. This is the one that I use and I don't want it to change, so I just have that one single one set up with the histogram in there so I can get a general idea of the exposure. If you want, you can turn on the other screens or adjust them as you would like with this info button or touching it on the screen to select which items you want to display on that screen. So I do have this disabled electronic level. I don't really care too much about it, but it could be useful in some situations, I guess, especially on the tripod if you want to turn that on. So with the viewfinder, we turn that off, so it's not anything we need to care about in this situation. You can turn on the grid if you want, helps you with the framing sometimes. I leave this on, so when you pull the screen out and you flip it, it will adjust the image on the screen. Viewfinder we don't need to care about. So with display settings, I mentioned I go into manual so that the screen doesn't flip between that and the viewfinder with the little sensor on there. I have it set to screen. Let's go into the custom functions. I adjust 2 buttons in this setup. So go to page 5, go in here. You've got the flash button, which is this one right here. I adjust it to autofocus method, which we'll look at, and also the little trash icon, I adjust that to ISO. And that's set up when we press this. I mentioned this in a different video. It cycles through the 3 different autofocus modes. Usually I have it set to this in B-roll situations, but for some times, you know, you might want to use one of these other ones. It's just a quick way to adjust that autofocus method by pressing that button to the side, and then it automatically moves, which is nice. Same thing with the trash icon, you press that, then you can adjust with the main dial. The ISO, which is something you would be changing a decent amount of times in these B-roll situations. Let's go back to the main menu to the My Menu setup area. I mentioned in some of my previous videos I don't use this too much, but in this specific situation it's nice to have some of these settings grouped together. You have the movie mode, IS settings, sound recording, white balance, picture style, ISO speed setup, and that's basically it for what I could fit in there. With these settings, they're good for the specific situation with B-roll stuff. So if I do want to change that for the type of video I'm filming, I do that. Or IS settings, that's a big one, to turn on and off relatively quickly, because it'll be on that screen. You press menu. If you leave it on this screen, it'll jump right to it. So it'll be decently fast. It'll at least save you a few button presses to get to these specific things. Same thing with sound recording. White balance, and then picture style. Let's just go into the ISO settings. So you could adjust things from here too if you don't want to use that. Of course, you can add a few more tabs, but I want it simple as possible. That way, if I do leave it on here, it will be relatively quick to change that up. That's it for these B-roll settings on the M50. Having a few things adjusted like that, such as the My Menu and these two buttons, make a big difference in just the general what I set it up as with the different modes. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing. That helps me out a lot. Likes and shares help out a lot as well. Thanks again. Scott Photography, Banzai.